Got to sit back and pinch yourself. And wow, did this really happen? We've been together for 20 years and we're making a living off of, you know, playing some crazy, obnoxious music.
20 years later, 54 countries later, 12, 14 albums, 1 million albums later, here we are.
Still stuck to our guns, still did it. I think that's why we're where we are today.
Well, there's nothing like stepping on stage and just hearing the crowd. There's no feeling like that in the world.
This is what I wanted to be my career. I took a shot and hit the target.
Some of the fondest memories of my life being with that band, for sure.
We got really lucky and we're really happy about it and we're really grateful to our fans, you know. I can't believe it. I can't believe we made it.
We're gonna start back to way back when.
Oh, here we go. This is like a therapy session or something to regress to childhood memories.
I've known Barnes probably longer than anybody in the music business in any regard from this point.
Chris Barnes lived just across the street from us, or the next street over.
We pretty much grew up a big portion of our lives together.
He was one of my best friends. I mean, I've known him, you know, he said since 7th grade.
We were really like brothers almost at a certain point in time in our families. You know, I was real close to his mom and dad.
Chris came over, slept at our house most weekends. Paulie would go to his house.
And just jam out whatever, Metallica, Exciter, anything totally heavy.
Geez, I think they did some air band stuff, if I remember.
Just air banding the songs and stuff.
You get into music at an early age, you know, it becomes your life, and then obviously you want to create your own.
And all of a sudden we were just like, we're pretty good at faking it. We might as well just try it for real.
But it was me, Chris Barnes, and a good friend of mine, Rich Ziegler. We all hung out, went to school together, and I remember the day when we said, you know what, let's start a band.
Me and Paul and Chris were sitting in my basement in my parents' house.
They were like, you know, what are we each going to play? And Paul was like, well, I know how to play drums.
My cousin, you know, is a drummer. My uncle's a drummer. I dabbled a little, and I wanted to play the drums, so I'm going to buy a drum set.
And he's like, oh, you guys should get instruments too, and we'll start a band.
And I was like, well, I want to play bass.
And I wasn't going to sing because I didn't want to, so I said, I'll do bass.
So I was kind of like bummed out because I wanted to play bass.
And Barnes ended up being a singer.
That was the real essence of the beginning of how I became a singer.
We had the name, we had song titles and everything like that, but we started the band before any of us even knew how to play and pick up a pick or an instrument.
Us three sort of formed this band that's not really a band because we don't have a guitar player.
And at that point, you know, we knew Bob from school.
We met Bob Rousset. He was a year older than us. He was a senior at the time.
It was 1985, we got Bob in the band, so we had the full band.
We were practicing at my house.
Paul was kind of proactive at getting us settled in. They had a finished basement.
They played a little bit in our house, maybe a month or so, 2 at most.
I sang out of Rich's bass amp out of another channel as a PA while he was playing.
When they did play, the neighbors talked about the ground shaking and whatnot.
Kind of learning our chops from the stuff we liked listening to.
We were a cover band, you know, we were still learning.
If I'm not mistaken, our first song that we attempted was a Pink Floyd song. That ended real quick.
The very first song we did learn was Dethroned Emperor by Celtic Frost.
And Exciter, pounding metal.
Balls to the Wall, except because they were easier to play. We weren't stepping right into trying to play Slayer. We couldn't do it.
Nobody took lessons. Everybody just learned by ear. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, I've got a very first tape of the Tyrant Sin days, and man, they sucked. They absolutely sucked.
Yo, man, what's with the fucking feedback back there, man?
He did some gigs playing cover tunes, and then Chris ended up quitting the band.
Basically left the band and decided to go ahead and venture out and jam with some other people, and ended up with a band called Leviathan.
And they were way ahead of us in the scheme of, well, they're doing originals, you know, kind of a thing. We weren't doing originals yet. We weren't good enough.
Leviathan was really the first local original underground metal band.
All the guys in Buffalo were looking up to Leviathan. They were like, wow, they were Slayer to everybody. That's how good they were.
When I did the Leviathan demo, Legions of the Undead, with a guy named Dennis Fura up in Niagara Falls.
The demos that we were making sounded good enough that other people would start coming into the studio to do some work with me.
Yeah, we want to work with Dennis. We want to come here. We want a demo that sounds as good as that. I love that demo. I love those songs.
We didn't have a singer yet.
We were just like, you know what? Let's just go into the studio. Let's record the songs. And Rich sang 2 of the songs, and I sang 2 of the songs.
Oh man, he's doing some like real high stuff. It's classic. I listen to it still, like on a steady basis.
I sound like a complete and utter idiot on these songs. I mean, when I listen back, I'm like, oh my gosh. Rich actually did a pretty good job, you know, at singing his 2 songs. He had like a lower voice.
Going home, stormy lights, really low, struck the sights.
It's completely horrible, and it sucks. The second demo, we got Dennis into the band. We did our first real shows as a band, playing completely original songs then, with him as a singer.
We met Beyond Death at one of our shows. I think it was Jack. He gave me a matchbook with his name on it and his phone number, and it said that I'm in this band called Beyond Death.
Beyond Death is a band that me and Jack and Darren Pfeiffer formed out in Akron.
We would just get together and listen to Metal Church records and listen to Testament records and Metallica, and we talked about starting this band.
I think we were at Darren Pfeiffer's house, and we go in his bedroom. He's got a drum kit. Pulls the blanket off. Like, check this out. And he plays like some Motley Crue beats. I'm like, holy shit, this guy's awesome.
Jack brought his amp, and his PA. He had a little PA, and Alex brought his little bass rig, and we would jam on songs.
We did 1 studio demo, and then we had a couple of live demos.
First Beyond Death demo was a brutal experience. We went to a studio, we didn't know what we were doing. The guy recording didn't know what he was doing, and we kind of were like, who's going to sing? And Alex was like, I guess I'll do it.
Oh, I used to sing. You didn't know that. That's what you're laughing about, right? Yeah, I used to sing with Beyond Death.
Alex, I thought, had a really awesome vocal.
It was crazy. He had a really good voice.
3 guys just writing these songs that we thought were the best songs in the world, because we actually were able to start and finish the song. And it was heavy, it was fast, it was thrashy, and there was a solo in one of them. We were so stoked.
We did 1 show at the Metal Shop as a 3-piece, and at that show, Tyrant Sin headlined, and Rob Barrett's band, Dark Deception, opened.
Dark Deception were amazing. They were very, very talented musicians. I mean, Bob, whatever you want to call him.
That's when I was Bob. I wasn't Rob yet.
It's Rob now, yeah. He was an amazing, very, very skilled guitar player. And he played with a drummer named Bob Del Monte.
Whenever somebody would call, hey Bob, both of us would look. So I was getting fed up with it. I was like, all right, my name's Rob now, okay? We realized when we played with Dark Deception and Tyrant Sin that these other bands were a lot better than us.
We looked up to them because they were a lot more polished of a metal band than we were. They were a lot more brutal of a metal band than we were.
And we also wanted to get a second guitar player, so I called Rob Barrett to see if he could give me any tips about who would be somebody good, you know, if he knew anybody around Buffalo. He said, yeah, there's this guy Frank Lombardi, he's awesome. He's got a room at this place called Absolute Storage where he just jams by himself. You know, he's looking to put a band together. And he said, maybe you guys should go get together with him.
And we were kind of in the process of writing songs. We weren't very good at it. And, you know, Frank had these great songs, and we thought they were amazing.
We're in if he wants to join.
We joined his songs with our songs, and then we started writing more songs, and Beyond Death started to make a little bit of a buzz in Buffalo. Once we got Frank in the band, he was singing.
Frank was the best in Beyond Death for the singing. He really had a great voice.
I liked Beyond Death. I thought they had the meanest crunch out there.
We looked at Beyond Death, and it's like, we felt they were a lot tighter than us.
Beyond Death was more of an SOD, early death metal sound, like Blood Feast or something.
We were practicing in Akron in Darren's basement for a long time, and that wasn't really cutting it. So we moved all our gear into Absolute Storage here, and Beyond Death practiced here.
Basically, everyone was at that Absolute Storage. We'd all come out into the hall or go see one of the other bands jam.
Sometimes Paul and Bob Rousset would come over to our room and jam a little bit. Sometimes I always used to go over to their room and watch them.
He was in Leviathan.
That's you're down the hall from me.
Yeah, and any
Next to
chance
the
that I
bathroom.
got, I would like try and go in there and watch them because they were like the best band in the scene at the time.
Leviathan were only short-lived. They did one demo with you. They only played 2 shows live in Buffalo. They ended up breaking up, and then Barnes ended up coming back into Tyrant Sin.
Paul just came to me and he said, you know, Chris has been our buddy and stuff, and we'd want to have him come back.
They were like, yeah, let's do it. So I kind of came back into it.
It wasn't like, F you, get the hell out of here. It was they did it nice. At the time, I was like, fuck you, but it's like, if you look at it now, it's like, whatever.
Messed around, did a demo with them called Mutant Supremacy.
And shortly after that, I quit. And that was pretty much the end of Tyrant Sin.
What the fuck?
Towards the end, me and Jack, we were leaning a lot more towards just straightforward death metal, like Sodom and Creator, Possessed and Death, those kind of bands. Darren and Frank were going a little bit more hardcore crossover, and so we split up.
Alex called me on the phone and said, yeah, Beyond Death is all but done.
We really were not mad at each other or anything when the band broke up. It just seemed like it was time to do something different.
When Tyrant Sin and Beyond Death broke up, it was just like, to keep going somehow, put forces together.
Me and Jack were like, yeah, let's call Bob and see what those guys are doing.
It was just like, hey, Bob, let's get together, jam, see what happens.
They were like, yeah, you guys could get in. This is perfect, so it'll be the 5 of us. So we're like, okay, let's make the band.
I was really psyched when that all came together.
That relationship, that marriage kind of happened, pretty quick in the formation of the band.
It seemed like it would be inevitable.
We always really loved Tyrant Sin's music, so the idea of jamming with those guys was something that me and Jack were very enthusiastic about.
It was that excitement, I think, of 2 entities coming together, forming one different entity that's a whole new ballgame. We all thought we had something pretty special right off the bat. The songs that we wrote pretty quick.
By the time I hooked up with Paul, Chris, and Bob, they had kind of that riff.
Basically, this is where me and Rousset started out jamming Skull Full of Maggots down here in my parents' basement. I set up my drum set, which would have probably been somewhere right around here, where we're standing sort of here.
After that, they went to a practice room.
We went back to this place. It's where our old bands had practiced, and we really liked this place a lot.
Me and Alex would drive 45 minutes, because we lived out in the country, and the band practiced in Buffalo.
We practiced, 5 days a week, sometimes 6, I think, but always Monday through Friday.
We just lived up there, basically.
I wasn't thinking about school or any of the part-time jobs I had. I was thinking about the band.
I would just take my boombox up to the rehearsal space, and they'd play the song that kind of was worked out the day before or whatever, and just take the tape home and write lyrics to it.
Within a couple weeks, I think we'd come up with the name for the band.
The name is fucking awesome. It's just Cannibal Corpse.
Cannibal Corpse. I was like, wow, what a cool ring.
Instead of saying hello for like a year, we're just like Cannibal Corpse. It's such a
we still do that.
It rolls off your tongue kind of weird. Cannibal Corpse, Cannibal Corpse.
And it seemed like it fit the lyrical direction we decided we wanted to go in.
Genius, whoever came up with the name of the band. Genius.
I came up with the name. I just thought it sounded cool.
I just remember him saying, Cannibal Corpse. And all of us going like, that's it.
Here's a good question though. What is a cannibal corpse?
Is it a cannibal that's a corpse?
You kind of analyze the word and you're like, okay, that's not a good thing, is it?
I immediately thought of, George Romero or some Night of the Living Dead.
Sometimes it's just Cannibal Corpse. It's like eating a corpse.
What it really is an undead zombie that's going to eat you. We did our first demo a couple months later. As soon as we had enough songs to do a demo, we had 5 good songs and a couple ones that we didn't really like too much.
It's a pretty crude snapshot of what the main idea behind the concept lyrically and what we wanted to visually put across in the aggressive nature of the music.
We did that at Border City Recording with Dennis Fura.
It was kind of a challenge for me, I remembered. I'm going, wow, you know, okay, let me see what I can do with this. I want to hear the guitars. I want to hear the vocals. I want to hear the bass. Kick drums, let's make sure we hear the kicks, you know, and because it's such a wall of sound. I would hear the same stories over and over. We went to such and such studio and they couldn't care less. You know, they just wanted to get us out. As soon as they heard our music, it was like, okay, well, these guys, blah, 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 blah. Let's just get this done and get them out of here.
You cared about it. You wanted to do the best, you know, that you could do and make us happy.
I just felt for them too, you know. It's like they've got this dream and, you know, they're just working so hard to come up with, you know, like $50, $60, $100 to come in and do a session.
We were young kids and we didn't have that kind of money to go into the studio.
Oh, I charged those guys a couple million for their demo. I knew they were
still paying them off, you know. I mean,
the money wasn't that big of a deal for me, but it was just making sure they got the product that they wanted.
Demo stuff back then was not like demo stuff today. It wasn't like overproduced.
That shit was low tech, baby. That was like a cassette with a red piece of construction paper with the word Cannibal Corpse on it. Yep. And that was it. It was like you could see where they typed everything out by hand.
We made 100 with white, and then we made another 100 with red covers.
There wasn't many of those sold, though, those demos.
So if you got one, that's one of 200.
One of the best things about it is I could actually read their logo.
There's a lot of stuff that you can't read.
Chris Barnes did the original Cannibal Corpse logo.
Dripping blood, and it was a mess, and it kind of expressed what the main thought of the band was.
Their logo was definitely one.
Yeah, and
like you could tell by looking at the logo what they were about.
Over the top, blood and zombies.
Home of the Hits was the first record store that sold our demo.
It was a staple in Buffalo to get your metal. Everybody and anybody would go there.
You'd run into a lot of people that lived in different neighborhoods going there to go buy metal.
So many of the death metal records that I own, I bought here. This was the only place to get it in town.
I think they just closed like the past couple of years. They just shut down.
It's changing times, you know. People are not able to sell copies of music the way they used to be able to.
You used to go to the record store and hang out and listen to new stuff, and now people are doing it alone on their computers and on their laptops or whatever.
I think I tape traded the first Cannibal record, and then I think after that we had CDs, and at the time blank CDs were kind of costly. They weren't like 10 cents like they are now. So people still kind of tape traded.
You know, just sending out tapes to everybody. We go to the post office with just like bags and bags filled with, you know, cassette tapes.
Back then it was cool to shove a tape in each other's pockets and, you know, check this shit out.
People would send out their handwritten or typed lists of the tapes they'd have, and you say, okay, I don't have that, I'll trade you this for that, and just getting worse and worse generation copies and just the worst recordings and just listening to them and still loving them.
To all the young kids who are watching this, we had to work for our music back then. You actually had to write to the bands, you wait for a response, you'd order the demo, you get the demo, and then you'd listen to it, and if it was great, you'd order a shirt and you'd support the band.
I wrote him a letter when I was like 14, you know, like fucking retarded.
Cannibal had the Maggot Colony fan club, and I wrote to him,
I love you guys so much. You should write a song about like water zombies or some shit.
like water zombies. But they actually responded and sent me a sticker, and Paul actually wrote, "Welcome to the Maggot Colony."
That's funny that Woody got one of those.
Back in the day, you know, we were all, of course, more gung-ho, and everybody's writing people back.
Yeah, they sent me a bunch of stickers and shit. I was like, holy fuck.
Somewhere right around here, I think just right around the corner on Forest, there was a copy place. And so we printed it out, put it like on a piece of paper 12 times, and then we went over there and ran off copies on sticker paper, like really bright green, bright orange. And then we'd snip them up and send them to people.
Prior to kids being able to like email their friends about bands, it was just literally about a buzz that would happen in cities.
We all kind of worked to build this scene together.
They had a lot of support from their friends here because you had like two guys that were doing local radio. You had
You know, you had Psycho, you had Venom.
I ran, it was Psycho's Metal Mayhem on WBNY. I did the metal show 10 till 2 every Tuesday night.
WBNY was the college radio station at Buffalo State College.
What I wanted to do was to play the heaviest, most brutal metal.
And that is definitely the first radio station that ever played Cannibal Corpse.
Well, I played them a lot because we were friends. But they're a great band. I mean, they were awesome.
And he did a great job with the metal show. He really helped the local scene a lot.
He always made sure that he would play at least 2 or 3 local bands every hour.
I was all about the local bands, which is where I became friends with those guys. If there was a band that I loved, and they were playing around, I'd bring them up to the show.
And we'd go down there and, you know, do interviews on the air and, you know, get to play songs or whatnot.
He used to promote all the shows that would be coming up on the radio.
People would tune into the station religiously to hear what Psycho had to say.
Kids freaked over Cannibal because it was, I mean, it was their local band doing this stuff.
By the time we got Cannibal going, there was like a buzz for that. So the first show, we got on a bill with Dark Angel.
I was on tour with Dark Angel. We were on our Leave Scars tour, and a bunch of dudes came up to us at our show in Buffalo and said, hey, we're in a band called Cannibal Corpse, and we're opening your show tonight. And I'm like, oh, cool. They're like, oh, we love your band and all that sort of stuff. And like, wow, this is your very first show. Cool.
You know, new band back in the day, playing our very first show, you know, and opening for one of our favorite bands.
Dark Angel at the time was huge. And to have a band that huge showing up, playing the River Rock.
That made no sense whatsoever.
There's like really no scene yet in Buffalo as far as like the heavier stuff went.
The promoter, Artie Kwitchkoff, he started bringing national death metal and thrash metal bands to Buffalo, and he would put Cannibal on the bill or some of the other bands, and that really pumps up the local scene.
At the time back then, the beauty of it was that you booked the band and you booked the headliner, and you could actually put local bands on a bill, which, you know, today it's almost impossible because every band is touring with 4 other bands.
We got the gig with a couple other local bands from Buffalo, a band called Baphomet, a band called Attack.
We really went all out to promote that Dark Angel show.
We do up the posters in all the fun colors. And you know, and go attack the streets of Buffalo.
He gave us, Baphomet and Attack, each like 2,000 flyers for that show, and we went to see Metallica in Queensryche. That was a week and a half before at the Odd, and we handed out all these flyers.
The flyers were on everybody's car after the show, so you went outside and there was flyers everywhere.
We flyered the entire upstate area.
So it was a total of like 8,000 flyers already made for that show.
I'm talking Metallica shows in Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo. We were all over the place.
I mean, I tortured those guys to, like, you know, to get out there and promote. But it worked in such a huge way.
Before the show started, there'd be lines around the whole bar. That was the best part. It's just everybody waiting to come in.
Into a little tiny club. And we sold it out and had to turn away a lot of people.
It was packed to the gills.
Listen, I got a couple questions for you. Anyone out there remember Leviathan? Yeah! Cool. How about Tyrant Sin? How about Beyond Death? You know what happens when you combine the best of each? That's right! Cannibal Corpse! Let's go!
You just felt your heart doing this the entire time, and we were all like high school kids, so I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ!
It was just the perfect first show.
And it started here, man. This is where it started, right over there.
Okay, we just put out a new demo like last week. You might have heard it on BNY. This is a song off of it. This is entitled The Undead Will Feast.
This was the pit right here. So when you were here, this is the pit. And when you jump here, this whole place feels like it's gonna fall over. Imagine 100, 300 kids in this area right here going crazy.
Everybody's going off, and slamming and diving.
You grab the kid next to you,
Yeah, you couldn't help it. It got into your blood. You just couldn't help it.
There's so much power. Just people were just pounding on each other. It was great, man.
It was non-stop from the very first song to the end of the show.
For a band doing their first show, yeah, I was really happy with it.
Yeah, that was really cool, and we just became pals, and they were a bunch of cute little kids.
It was real apparent after that show that Cannibal was the band that was going to kind of eclipse everybody else. And that like woke up the town. From there on in, man, the scene only got stronger and stronger.
Those guys were doing something which had never really been seen around here, so all of us were like, whoa.
Come on, let's fucking see you!
It was clearly head and shoulders above Beyond Death and much, much better than Tyrant Sin. And it was a total 180 direction. It was like as brutal and fast and as gnarly and as aggressive as it can get.
And they were getting away with it. Like, we were all thinking it, but no one had the balls to do it. And these guys had the balls to do it. We were like, yes, those guys right there.
You go to see them, and there'd be kids everywhere. The place would be packed, and it was cool because it's like, wow, this really is something.
Buffalo completely embraced Cannibal Corpse. The newspaper always had something about Cannibal Corpse in it.
We really made the scene such a big deal in Buffalo that the Buffalo News wrote about it. I'm sure most of the people in Western New York, when they read this, were probably scared for their children. That's a whole lot of hair in that picture.
All of a sudden, you got an army of long-haired kids showing up in leather jackets and jean vests with, patches all over them, and band starts playing. You see hair windmills and people just slamming in circles. The older people are looking at this going, what the hell is this?
I got a little crap from some people in the city and things happen, but it doesn't affect me because they couldn't stop it.
This is from '89. This is at the River Rock, the shot, because I can see the owner in the background at the soundboard. John let us go in and go do all these shows. Didn't freak out and didn't throw us out, and he got a kick out of it.
There was all these bands, didn't have no place to play. And when you're in a band, you got no place to play, you kind of do it for a while, then you piddle out and stop doing it. There's no motivation. But if you're doing it in front of people and you get the feel and you love it, that's what causes it to go. So, I helped.
He didn't really care if we were good or not. He just wanted to get the scene going.
And we got to play some big shows with Cannibal right off the bat. Thanks to Artie and Brian and you bringing us in here.
Well, that was huge having a guy, like John there helping the scene out.
Without him opening up the gate to his club and letting people come in and use his soundboard and his PA, metal wouldn't have flourished in the city of Buffalo back then.
This one is Enter at Your Own Risk.
We went from no one even knowing where Buffalo was to people were dying to come play there because of the scene we had built up there.
Watching it grow was really cool.
We went from a small club that held 400 people to a big club that held 2,000 people.
It seemed like we were playing a show then almost every other month or every couple of weeks with a national act.
Here's a classic. Creator with Cannibal and Corner.
We opened for Blood Feast. We opened for The Accused. We opened for Death.
I watched that show and stood back and went,
yeah, I think there was actually
what the fuck is going on here?
There was probably 1,000 people.
Yeah, it was sold out, 1,200 people.
All the Skyroom shows were great. That's when they really started taking off. I mean, the place would always be packed whenever they played there.
When we first played here, it was like, wow, we're playing the Skyroom. It was such a big deal because it was a big staple in the music scene for Buffalo.
It was actually the real club, the real concert experience.
Within a year of them starting to really play shows, they had opened the floodgates.
It was really becoming explosive. It was a real micro universe in Buffalo, New York.
There was a lot of bands, that were around, a lot of local bands, and a lot of good local bands.
Mayhemesis.
Terminal Grace. A couple of those guys went on to Green Jello, Green Jelly.
Attack.
Baphomet.
Humongous.
Zero Tolerance.
Killing Spree.
Malevolent Creation was a really great metal band that came out of Buffalo.
Cannibal Corpse and Malevolent would do shows together all the time.
A lot of diehard local fans that were always there.
They used to do whatever they had to do to help the band out, be it passing out flyers, calling people, telling them about shows.
We heard they were playing out of town. It was like, oh, road trip, let's go. And you'd have guys packing into vans and bumming rides off of people like, dude, what do I got to do to catch a ride with you to Pennsylvania? Or dude, they're going to upstate New York, man. What are we doing?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that followed us around.
Everyone just became, like a close community of friends. We all knew each other. We all hung out together.
It was almost a cliche. It was like bonded in metal.
You'd call people up, hey, dude, what are you doing? Oh, we're going to go see Cannibal and then hang out at Alex's house afterwards. All right, cool, let's go.
This is one of the apartments I lived in when I was going to Buff State College, and that was right when Cannibal was first getting going. Me, Mark, Psycho Abramson, and our buddy Joe Agan. The three of us shared this house.
It was the metal house of Buffalo.
A lot of times the other guys in the band would come over to party.
Yeah, I do remember that stinking hole in the wall.
You see now it says no trespassing, bank-owned properties.
It was just wretched, man. I mean, it was a horrible place, man.
So much shit's boarded up around here, it's kind of depressing.
It should have been boarded up then.
We had much, oh my God. I mean,
a lot of wild, crazy fucking nights.
People falling out the windows kind of parties.
It's like Animal House, but metal. The other guys in Cannibal all lived a little farther out, and they, you know, they had cars and stuff. I was the one who was kind of all over the place.
We would all fight as hard as we could to not do dishes. So, I mean, it was a cockroach-infested, horrible nightmare place.
I'd be sleeping in late, and the other guys were a lot more responsible.
Barnes was working at a store in Buffalo called Cabbages. It was a record store.
Became really good friends with a guy named John Grandoni.
John was pretty instrumental in helping those guys out early on.
He was like my guru, you know. Basically, I learned a lot about the record industry from him.
John was aware of the demand through kids coming into Cabbages looking for the Cannibal Corpse stuff.
He was good friends with Mike Faley at Metal Blade.
Chris was like, hey man, this guy wants to help us, and he's got a couple connections. He can send the demos out to a couple people.
It ended up getting on Mike's desk.
Metal Blade's vice president, Mike Faley, was from Buffalo, so kind of an in there to not knock our demo off the desk.
There were videos that were out there. There were people I could call in Buffalo that would tell me about the band live and everything else, so we could get a pretty good idea of what the band was about.
I was managing the Goo Goo Dolls, who were on Metal Blade, so Mike called me and said, you know, can you tell me about this band Cannibal Corpse? And it was like, well, they're it.
The first thing I remember about their tape, before I even listened to it, was they had a song called A Skull Full of Maggots.
They saw that title. It was like, Skull Full of Maggots, this is awesome.
And initially I was like, I really have to sign this band just based on the song title itself.
That song title really kind of dug into people's memory.
We liked the tape, and we decided, you know what, we're going to put this band out.
Called them up and said, hey, we want to sign you.
I believe it was July of '89. I got a record contract sent to my house.
I was like, you're kidding. You gotta be kidding me. Are you serious? He's like, I'm serious.
So like Metal Blade, Established, Armored Saint, Flotsam and Jetsam, Lizzie Borden, Slayer. You know, a good track record.
90% of the things that I would find in a record store, I'd be looking at it, and I'd turn it over, oh, it's on Metal Blade. Okay, that's kick-ass. It's got Brian Slagle's name on it. That guy is awesome. It was just like kind of a surreal thing to get this record contract from someone that I really admired.
And I was kind of in a state of disbelief. I was like, I can't believe a band that we're in, we got signed, we haven't even been a band for a year.
It hit us in the head, you know, like what the hell what are you talking about? We can sign a Metal Blade? I mean, are you, what?
So we're like, record contract, we're in.
That was that. It was pretty simple.
People in Buffalo were really excited for them. It's almost like the fans of Beyond Death and the fans of Tyrant Sin and the fans of metal in Buffalo in general felt that they had got signed and that they were successful.
It definitely was inspiring, especially for an area where you think the world's not watching, and a band like Corpse can get signed.
Everybody that hung out in the scene in Buffalo back then, it was all who's going to get signed first.
Anybody who's ever picked up a guitar or picked up a drumstick, that's your dream, is to get signed and to be able to play music for your life.
Labels weren't signing death metal, you know, at that time. It was real new.
It was our first death metal band. We had not signed a death metal band up to that point.
There was discussion at the time, why did Slagle sign these guys? Because Metal Blade wasn't even a death metal label.
People kind of was like, oh, what are you signing that band for? And, you know, are they real?
They didn't see what we had seen in the band. Critics and reviewers and business people, yeah, they thought they were a joke. But, you know, as happens time and time again in the music world, people spoke.
Fans get it before industry people get it a lot of times.
We were doing this really extreme music and there wasn't a lot of love for it. But there was an underground, and that underground was brewing throughout the 80s.
Certainly 88, 89 is when what I would call like the first real wave of American death metal being known as death metal happened.
You had Autopsy from the West Coast, you had bands like Us and Suffocation and Incantation up in the north, and then Tampa kind of had its scene.
You had Eulogy, you had Monstrosity, Deicide, Solstice, Cynic from down south.
Down there, it was like kind of like Wild West of metal.
A ton of killer bands started coming out of Florida and especially Tampa.
Oh, it was a scene back in 84, 85 with Sabotage. That kind of carried over to like the death metal thing.
I think if you ask any of the kids here, they all grew up on Sabotage.
Sabotage is the band that made a music scene in Tampa and Central Florida. It was Sabotage. And they're like the gods and the godfathers, and we all worship John Oliva and Chris, and they're the band that put Florida on the map.
Atheist had a record recorded, it wasn't out yet. Morbid Angel had recorded an album even though it wasn't released. Obituary's done a record for Roadrunner. Slowly We Rot, Death Leprosy had already been out for a while. So those were like the first albums to really start getting national exposure.
When you're in a band and you like the way a band sounds, you go right to the production line and you find who produced this. Let's use that guy.
Not only was it created in Tampa, but it was actually created at Morrisound Studios in Tampa.
Morrisound was a large format professional major recording studio in Tampa that at the time really are kind of the people that sort of figured out what to do with this type of music.
Nobody gave a shit about the death metal bands and their sounds, and they sounded like they were in a fucking blender.
Studios had no idea how to handle a kick drum like that, how to handle those vocals or that guitar sound. Everything would always come out sounding like mud.
It's easy to make a record, like when you listen to a pop record, sound good. It's got big wide open spaces and there's places to put keyboards or backing vocals and nice big holes everywhere. It's hard when everything is 200 miles an hour. There's double bass, there's cymbals, there's fast riffs, there's bass, and everybody wants their part prominent and heard.
Scott was probably the first highly trained technician who was a qualified engineer who made this music, something you could listen to and not completely cringe.
Actually, Scott came in to do Slowly We Rot by accident. He was actually the engineer on the mix, and the producer was actually Rick Miller. I think someone was sick in his family, so he had to go to California or something. And we said, "Scott, you want to try it?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he started holding the controls, and that's how he got involved with us.
Everybody heard Slowly We Rot and was like hooked on that. They wanted that heavy, in your face kind of vibe.
Back then, Scott Burns, he was just the guy. There wasn't really any other guys even talked about. It was just like Scott Burns. Oh, of course we're going to Scott Burns.
Scott was the man that kind of put Morrisound on the death metal map.
A lot of amazing albums that Scott didn't even do, like a lot of albums that Jim Morris did. And Tom Morris out of there, and Tom Morris as well, that came out of there that were amazing albums.
Jim and Tom were really ahead of the scene with like drum triggering and replacements.
Now, double bass drumming is a huge part of death metal music, and Morrisound was the first studio in America, in my opinion, that really knew how to handle that kind of drumming.
That's really how Morrisound kind of contributed to this rising scene down here.
It was the magic blessing that you received, you gotta go through the death metal gates at Morrisound to get your death metal wings or something,
The Florida bands really made Morrisound big. Those bands and Sepultura from Brazil, they were like the one exception as far as the really early Morrisound stuff.
Well, he finished the Slowly album and then he did the Sepultura record.
Really?
Yeah. I think they heard some of the demo tapes and the pre-production of what we did. And they were like, "Oh, we want that guy."
Basically, it came down to they had nobody that wanted to go to Brazil over Christmas, and everyone thought Sepultura sucked, all the big producers. So Roadrunner was left with nobody, and they said, "Well, we know Scott, he's worked on some stuff for us, and why not go down there?" So I was in college, and I was like, "Hell, what the hell?" I like the music. I've never been to Brazil, and sure, sounds like fun. So we went down there, and I guess kind of that took off.
After we heard Beneath the Remains from Sepultura, I don't think there was any doubt that we were going to come here to Morrisound.
We're like, hey, let's record with Scott Burns. He did Sepultura.
Kind of called information, looked for Morrisound, and then was like, is Scott Burns there?
I didn't really do any filtering on it. If you called me up and said you wanted to come down, I was like, sure, come on down.
We prepared ourselves to make the long road trip in the dead of winter.
We packed up Jack's van.
Jack's piece of shit white Chevy van.
We packed up my pickup truck.
Drove all the way down to Florida.
Where the hell are we?
We're in South Carolina.
It's so classic. The whole trip was a magical journey of 5 crazy youths.
Pumping gas.
None of us have been too many places at this point, so this was a big thing for us.
For a bunch of young kids to venture 1,200 miles away from home.
To leave Buffalo to come down to record our first CD.
Look at all these peacocks. These are all corpse peacocks.
They're prepared for the arrival of the corpse. Look at the tail on that peacock, man. That's
Where?
like the king peacock, this blue one.
Wow.
There's like
Look at that tail.
800 peacocks at our door.
We're in Tampa, it's nice weather.
Man, I'm hot.
A, it's a Florida vacation, and B, we're ready to go, we're ready to record, we've got everything written.
God, I got such good memories about this place. When we first came down, you know, and you walk in the door, they used to have the album covers of Beneath the Remains, Altars of Madness. You know, some of the great records that they did here were up on the wall.
And the Beatles were here once.
Yes, they recorded
They
here.
recorded here.
12 albums in 1 week.
I remember going, yes, Morrisound. Like, wow, look at this Morrisound.
I was like, man, I can't believe we're really here.
To see a real studio, the way the A room is set up in Morrisound, it's still that way. Huge drum room, we're just freaking out.
This is the drum kit. There's Paul's feet. They're pounding away like never before. No, there's Jack. There's not Paul.
Here we are in the main A room. Brings back memories because, you know, spent many of hour in this room, you know, just doing drum tracks, just kind of hanging out. To be in a real studio for the first time to record, this was it, you know.
It was intimidating because you start thinking, well, these guys are used to the pros. They're used to recording bands that we look up to. Are they going to think we're a bunch of hacks?
They just weren't, you know, a bunch of hacks. You could just tell from the beginning that they were into it, that they cared about what they did, and they were serious.
And Scott was so nice. I mean, I didn't feel intimidated by him. He's just such a sweetheart of a guy and couldn't have been more accommodating of a person.
I can't overstate how important it was that we came here and worked with Scott in the beginning because we needed some direction.
We didn't know what to bring as far as gear. We were ready like guitar-wise and bass guitar-wise and drum set-wise, but as far as like what they should all sound like, we didn't really know.
Look at all that stuff.
Look at all those little knobs.
Look at this, man. Look at that. Ooh, isn't that nice?
That's a lot of stuff.
Well, they weren't too knowledgeable that you could punch in and, you know, multi-tracking and things like that.
He gave us some ideas where, oh, maybe you should have a solo here because this section sounds kind of bare, that kind of thing, or oh, that harmony's not working.
You went on that riff for 2 minutes. Maybe it would be catchier if you only did it for 8 bars instead of 4.
Because the band was kind of a train wreck back then, but in a good way. By the time we got into the studio, it was a little more under control.
Cannibal's always had an abrasive kind of sound, like almost out of control kind of sound, and I think it's exciting. It's almost like it's just a freight train running at full steam, and sometimes it might derail, but it just stays on just enough so it doesn't go crazy.
Controlling the madness, that was what Scott did.
As far as making a bunch of young kids that were probably annoying him to no end with asking him questions about bands that he had recorded like Death and Sepultura.
I give him a lot of credit for putting up with the kind of nonsense you got to put up with a bunch of young guys that don't really know what they're doing.
When you're there and you're not in the studio itself, you're in the lobby.
This is where we did a lot of our hanging out, you know, and downtime or what have you, you know, eat some lunch and watch some TV.
I'm feeding the fish. Jack, we're feed the fish. I'm going to disappear for y'all.
Look at this. Holy shit, what happened? Wait, let's see if we can get him back.
Bob! Bob, come back!
Oh, I can't even explain any of that stuff.
We were trying to get as tech as possible with the disappearing.
It was pretty high technology back then.
Film me here, all right? Film me there. Frame.
We would watch that shit over and over and just laugh. We never wanted to go back. We really loved that tape we had, me and Paul riding back. I don't think we took that tape out of the cassette deck the whole way back to Buffalo. I think we just jammed that.
It's probably my favorite album in the sense of it's our first album, and that is as pure as it was going to be. It had that raw quality to it, just pure adrenaline, that pure from the heart. Man, everyone was just playing and loved it. And this is what we wanted to do. It's so bad.
I was reading the lyrics and listening to the CD and thinking, I can't believe somebody actually mixed metal and gore.
All 5 of us in the band loved horror movies and stories and all that, so it was a common kind of a thing.
We wanted that to be, you know, what the band was about. Gore, killing, cutting people up and eating them.
You love it, and it's exhilarating, and, you know, it's like, you know, the primal urge and fascination with death.
People are interested in the dark side of life. You're interested by things that you're afraid of.
You get the same joy from those kinds of things as you do from watching, like, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
We want to write about horror and aggressive stuff and songs with graphic violence. It's just what seems to be very natural for this kind of music.
No one else had taken it to that level of just sheer gore.
It's because there was bands that were doing the gore lyric and then they'd have a song about Satan or something, you know what I mean?
Whole records would shift on topics or subject matter.
Possessed was doing the Satan stuff, and Slayer was certainly doing the Satan stuff, but they were doing a lot of death and Satan and hell.
They just got really kind of articulate about a specific type of gore.
They had a concept of how a record would look, how an artwork would look. The cover aspects of a record was being built off of the lyrical style that was being put on the record.
There was a comic book called Dead World Comics, and it was pretty big in the underground comic book scene.
Just first comic I ever did. It's a horror comic, lots of zombies and gore and very tongue-in-cheek. Kind of like Dawn of the Dead with zombies, but the zombies were intelligent. Very dark humor, lots of violence.
And we had a song called The Undead Will Feast, which is about zombies eating people. To have a guy who did a comic book based on zombies taking over the earth and that sort of thing would be the perfect match for a band like us that had songs that were horror.
I called up Vincent Locke out of the blue. I called up information. I kind of tracked him down where the comic book was from.
Chris Barnes hunted me down.
He's kind of a vampire kind of dude.
I was a little nervous at first getting the call from somebody I didn't know. It's like, oh, what kind of fans do I have? They're hunting me down.
I remember Barnes coming in and saying, yeah, talk to Vince Locke, and he's like, I work from midnight to 6 in the morning. He's like, cool, dude. Here's some song titles. See what you can come up with.
I was really pushing the violence on the covers for Dead World, and the band really wanted to do that on their album covers.
Paul came up with Eaten Back to Life, the album title.
I think in particular he said he wanted a zombie in the graveyard. I wanted something very energetic, so I thought, well, I'll have him ripping his own chest out, and it'll be kind of cool. Hopefully to get people's attention.
I was like, holy shit.
We're like, holy shit, that's killer.
The band liked it, seemed really happy with it.
I was like, oh my God, dude, that is fucking amazing.
He tried to incorporate some of the song titles, I think. There's a skull full of maggots on the ground. There's so much detail, so many cool things going on. A Virgin Mary covered with blood and that sort of thing on the back is thrown in as a bonus.
It sure did look great when I saw it at Home of the Hits. I was like, wow, our CDs, you know, at a record store.
We were somebody now, you know, we released an album, you know, as opposed to just having a demo out or whatever and being known in the Buffalo scene locally.
I said, we might actually do well because we have such an amazing looking cover for us. It's a way to get noticed.
I was like, this has to be a metal band. This has to be heavy.
And I remember going into the store and seeing that and went, how can they do this? The first thing I noticed were the album covers. And
yeah, hard to masturbate to, not impossible.
And they're like, wow, this is cool. I'm interested in checking this out based on the cover. And then they hear it. Hopefully they like the music as well.
That's all I listened to night and day. That was like my favorite record for a really, really long time.
We thought it was awesome because it was really aggressive, but it had still like that thrash element going on.
They got the horror and the gore aspect of death metal right from the beginning, way before they even got the death metal musical aspect nailed down perfectly.
Because some of the songs on Eaten Back to Life, you can definitely hear a little bit more of an old school thrash influence on there.
After Eaten Back to Life, We didn't do a proper tour, we just did shows here and there.
A lot of shows in the New York City area, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Rochester, Montreal, Toronto, all the stuff that was within a drive we tried to get to.
The show that really sticks in my head was the show at the Electric Banana in Pittsburgh that was in front of like 12 people.
There was like 13 people there.
There was no one there.
Day of Death, first huge death metal festival. Cannibal Corpse, Immolation, Deceased, Radiation Sickness.
Mortician, Autopsy. A lot of these bands weren't, they were new, they were just emerging on the scene.
First time any of us saw Suffocation, absolute madness, and every single band destroyed every single one of them.
We're like, okay, well now what? I guess we just end up writing more songs. So we sat in the rehearsal space at Absolute Storage and just kept writing.
Down Florida, we will be dead 1 hour and 1 half.
They went back to Scott to go and perfect more what they were doing.
They got better as songwriters.
Kind of had more of an understanding about what we were doing and really meshing more together.
Legit! What a fucking asshole! Fuck you!
Oh, he says fuck you! Back then, songs would just write themselves because you had 5 people on the same page.
It was pretty much just kind of like a collaborative effort. Whoever had a riff, kind of guy show riff, oh, I got another riff, okay, hey, it kind of fits with this. Before you know it, you have a song.
That album, I wrote all the lyrics for that.
Raped of all bodily extensions.
But for the first album, I had a few lyrics, not particularly good ones. Jack contributed some lyrics, Paul contributed a few.
And then on the second one, it was kind of like, well, we were concentrating more on the music. He wanted to write the lyrics. Hey, go for it. You're the singer. Sure, write the lyrics, And yeah, they were some brutal, graphic, horrific lyrics that, stirred up some controversy, got things moving.
He was one of the progenitors of the gore style, He helped create the style of the gore lyrics.
I had a lot of fun. I remember, laying in bed with a pen and paper and my Walkman on and writing lyrics to Vomit the Soul.
Cannibal Corpse, their style definitely changed over records. With the change of the music, the vocals changed fittingly.
When you look at how quick of a turnaround it went from, say, the demo to Butchered at Birth, it's night and day.
He started out having more of a creator or accused kind of voice, more of a like the raspier, higher stuff, which is still killer and in a way could be considered a different type of death metal vocal.
I knew early on when I was singing cover songs I could never really sing high like Rob Halford or Jeff Tate, which I loved. I wish I could have sang like that, but I just didn't have that register in my voice, so I just kind of kept trying to blend my voice into the music a little bit more.
He went from here to really low, guttural vocals, super low. Just whoa, this is crazy sounding.
Just decided that was the way to go. With the lyrics he was writing and the music we were writing, it's just kind of fit. And it was a natural thing for them to just go lower and lower and see how heavy the vocals could be.
The music was getting heavier and more chunky and just brutal, so I figured I would have to become another instrument as far as on top of the music.
Lawrence had his own style and definitely was instantly recognizable.
Really, when you think back, who was the first guttural singer?
Chris would have to be one of the first ones, for sure.
I don't know where it started from, to be honest with you. I don't know what band was the first that came up with it. Do you know?
Chuck probably would be the first real death metal singer, I guess, from Death.
Everybody used to tell Chuck, you're the godfather of death metal. You created death metal, and Chuck was very uncomfortable with that, thing because he was like, God, bands were doing this before me. I mean, Possessed. They have a song called Death Metal, for God's sake.
You could probably argue Jeff Becerra from Possessed, but he wasn't maybe as guttural,
There's so many different versions of it, so I'd say it's hard to really judge the initial. Everybody has a different answer on it.
Venom, Possessed, Celtic Frost.
Hellhammer. Yeah, Hellhammer was a big thing for us. We hear that the song Triumph of Death, and it was just like he was screaming like he was getting murdered. And we figured that's ultimate, like really have someone like killing somebody. What's that going to sound like?
I heard the Obituary record. We heard John Tardy's vocals, and we were like, what the hell is this? I'm like, this guy is God.
The next guy says, well, if he goes, I'm going to go.
People that listen to death metal, unless you have like a death metal decoder in your brain and you actually can speak in that low tone or whatever, you don't know what the hell's going on. It just sounds like a monster's on the microphone.
Just for you. Mortician, they had really low vocals before we did. Immolation did.
I think it just kind of had a slow evolution.
I feel as though I had a good hand in laying the foundation of what the death metal vocalist is.
I'm sure there's been lots of people that have tried to imitate him as well.
I actually started doing these kind of vocals by trying to outdo Chris Barnes.
People were going, how can a human voice do that?
Most of the good singers, especially Chris's, you didn't have to do a lot of effects to them to make them sound heavy. I mean, they sounded heavy on their own.
A lot of people thought that there was harmonizers used, and I guess some bands have used harmonizers.
With the deep vocals, a lot of guys cheated. Maybe they slowed down the tape or put a lot of echo on it.
There was none of that going on with Chris.
It was important for them to let people know, look, we didn't rely on a studio or an effect to make us brutal or my voice to sound this way.
They're like purists.
Like, we went in and did it right.
I didn't really grasp the complete idea behind death metal until I was reading lyrics from Butchered at Birth. My parents were completely stoked on that. They loved it.
I remember eating cereal and thinking about the lyrics to Butchered at Birth and just being like, I can't even eat this. All I can think about is Afterbirth.
The band's imagery really solidified on that album as far as lyrical content, artwork, music, presentation.
When Vince Locke did Butchered at Birth, that was insane.
When he sent me that cover and I opened it, I was just, my jaw dropped to the ground, and then I sat down and I just stared at it.
I remember when it came in and it was kind of like, I wonder what Brian's going to think.
As soon as I saw it, I go, looks like we're going to have some problems at retail here.
I think it's brilliant. It's one of the greatest covers I've ever seen. I absolutely love it.
It was even more amazing that Metal Blade put that album cover out.
I love to stir things up and, get reactions out of people, and that certainly, we certainly did that with that cover.
I saw that and I was like, oh my damn, that has got to piss some people off.
It's so offensive.
Very offensive.
But it rules.
It's one thing to have people dying and just things, but when you start messing with children, then people start getting pissed off.
Butchered at Birth is pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
It just makes you feel very uneasy.
It took me a few attempts at the store to be able to buy the record because I was afraid of it. And I was more afraid that my parents were going to find it.
It's kind of hard to explain that to Mom. I work at this place where, they have record covers that have pregnant women getting dissected by zombies.
That was really the beginning right there of Cannibal Corpse, Butchered at Birth, and that album cover as far as the next step of the band.
I don't know where we are.
The first tour was in Europe.
That was October of '91.
It was such a big deal for us to not only be doing a tour finally, but also to be doing it in Europe.
Going to Europe for the first time really kind of freaked me out because I didn't know what to expect.
That was a headline tour for them because very few bands wanted to go out with them.
Metal Blade got the offer and then they contacted me and said, hey, this guy over in Europe wants to bring you over.
A company called Metalize that we wound up working with for many, many years, they called us up and got us to come over, and we toured with the French band Loud Blast.
I think we got paid like $500 a show or something.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, we're going to get paid to go to Europe?
This is like amazing. I want to do this forever.
So I decided I'd take a semester off to go do that tour.
And we had other stuff lined up, and I remember I don't think I worked again. I think I was like, well, that's it, I'm quitting.
The band started doing really well, so I never went back to school. I never graduated.
Most of us were doing drywall finishing and working for the same company.
We're like, going back to work? Nope.
growing up. I never even thought I'd ever go to Europe.
We didn't know. We were just jamming around Buffalo. We're like, this is cool. There's like 150 people at the show.
Buffalo was a good starting grounds and proving grounds, brought all these talented musicians together, but it was actually the notoriety that they were gaining in other cities.
The minute we get off the tour bus at the first show in France, autographs, photos, everything. We're just like, wow, this is pretty big stuff over here.
Really was surprised with how many people were at our shows. They'd all heard of us and loved our music. I think we were pulling in like close to 500 people some nights.
You do headliners to 300 to 500 people. Festivals get up to like 2,000, 2,500 people.
We are in Hamburg, Germany.
But then after that, we came back. Metal Blade set us up with a booking agent.
First American tour was in 1992.
With Gorguts and Atheist, and traveled around the whole country. All of us in a passenger van.
It was all of us were just crammed into this van.
Two bands in a 15-passenger.
The very first date was in Toronto.
I would venture to say it was 20 below zero without a wind chill.
It got a flat tire. Then we left there, we went to Montreal, it was the second date.
And somebody slammed the van door, the window shatters.
Shatters from it being ice cold out.
And we got to drive all the way back down to New York with no glass in the window.
And we ended up putting cardboard up against the window, freezing our asses off.
Which is bad enough, and then we're going into New York, crossing GWB, and a trailer comes unhooked.
It didn't have an actual trailer hitch. It was a separate hitch. It was a trailer hitch that was on the bumper.
And we pull over right before the bridge, like on the side of the road, this much space.
So Psycho and I ended up walking over the George Washington Bridge in the middle of January. It was like 10 degrees out.
We had to go get help, and we had to go to find a gas station.
We get over the other side of the bridge where the phone is. We called the rental company.
They came out with another van with another trailer hitch on it, but the ball was too small.
Started going again, didn't even get a half mile. It came off again, and that was it, it was done.
And we were pretty much dead center of the bridge, and the trailer pops off, the safety chain snaps.
I remember turning around looking, and the trailer is just rolling by itself and just goes,
and that trailer went side to side and went from the very right lane all the way over to the left lane and hit the concrete barrier and ended up in pieces.
And we're sitting there looking at almost all our equipment scattered everywhere, and they ended up shutting down the bridge because we're holding up traffic.
Stopped traffic in like 3 out of the 5 lanes for about an hour, hour and a half.
We caused a pretty good ruckus, in the city that day.
And sure enough, of course, like the 10-10 winds of the news station, the helicopters flying over.
It definitely made us go, oh great, what's to come, if this is happening now.
They had the Port Authority cops yelling and screaming at them. They had the police yelling and screaming at them. People giving them the bird as they were trying to get by. People trying to get into New York just yelling at them.
I put in my first famous call to Mike Faley. I said, Mike, I'm turning this van around. We're going back home, man. I can't do this, man.
I go, right now, this isn't funny. I go, but years from now, you're going to be able to look back at this and you're going to be able to laugh at it.
We're back on the George Washington Bridge, and things are going a lot better this time.
A lot better. The trailer's still on the back.
That first tour with Gorguts and Atheist and the European tour made us even work harder from that point on.
We just kind of wanted to get better and better as the albums went along.
They want to do something heavier. Everyone wanted to do something just a little bit more above, the notch. You're a little heavier than what everyone else was doing.
Bands like us, Deicide, Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, trying to be heavier than Black Sabbath or Slayer, Celtic Frost.
We were always about pushing those boundaries, and trying to be faster and harder and more technical and more everything.
I think the key to those bands was they didn't think about it. They just did it.
I really just think it was all kind of coming from within us, who we were going to be as a band, and then as you get going, other bands are doing stuff, and then maybe you got a little more guidelines. You can have some other references. Oh, well, wow, listen what that band's doing. Listen what that band's doing.
A lot of the Cannibal Corpse signature things are things that happened by accident. We'd hear one thing from one of our favorite bands and then kind of try and imitate it. We'd be imitating it in the wrong way, and it wound up being our style.
There's certain things you hear in a Cannibal where you don't hear in other bands, where there's the speed part is there, there's always just the pounding beat. I call it the Cannibal groove. It definitely separates them from all other bands.
Cannibal with another drummer, it just wouldn't sound like Cannibal at all.
The first thing that I would notice was the drums, because, you know, I'm a drummer trying to learn to play, and yeah, well, I heard the Paul stuff, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do this anytime soon.
He's got his own style, really, as far as a death metal drummer goes. Not many people can play like him.
He pretty much invented a new style of drum beat, which is like the bomb blast beat.
It was no conscious effort. It wasn't like, well, this is how I'm going to do it. It was more like, okay, let me sit down literally and go, this is what comes out, and that's the way I played.
The way Paul played, it was just kind of on the verge of out of control. Snare on top, and we just went with it because we didn't know any better. But it worked.
I'm listening to, say, Pete Sandoval, and I'm not trying to mimic exactly what he does, but I'm doing my own version. So my version of that kind of a beat was different. I was playing with 2 kick drums.
I didn't understand what was going on, but it sounded like a freight train. Has this like freight train sound to it, and I was like, this is sick, how does he do that? He's getting into it. It's like, bah, 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 bah.
Attacks that drum kit like he's running a race.
Frantic. Machine gun fire, man.
Yeah, I didn't know how you would survive a whole tour just playing that fast. It was crazy.
I could have a heart attack.
The original blast is a 1-foot blast, you know. It's just, you know, 1 foot meaning you're only playing on 1 kick drum, and you're playing, you know, the snare kick and you know, the ride cymbal maybe, and it's a super hyper beat.
For his blast, he'll play the double bass fast, say similar to a fast Dave Lombardo beat where you've got...
You know, I play my ride and my hi-hat, you know, with my right hand and all that, but when I went to try to do this beat, for some reason, it just felt natural for me to play the snare drum with my right hand and use my left hand on the hi-hat.
It was just trying to play so fast that he had to break from tradition just to get like that and just play as fast as he possibly could with his hands and his feet.
He hits the hi-hat and the snare drum at the same time, but does double bass under that.
That's how he plays. Like if this was a snare drum, hi-hat, he would play it like that.
So the snare is getting the power of his right hand, his strong hand.
If you play your hi-hat with your left and your snare with your right, you can get more snare hits in, and your arm won't get so tired as if you're doing this.
In a drumming sense, that is probably a better approach to it, because if you are playing this way, it's much easier for you to get around the drums, get around the roll, whereas if you're like this, you got to then cross your hands and then, you know, come out of it.
I've never looked at myself as being a percussionist. A lot of drummers I look at and a lot of musicians, you know, they're percussionists. They can play, they can read music, they can do. I can't do any of that. I mean, I never learned how to read music. I never took formal lessons or anything like that.
He's got a standard setup, you know, 3 rack toms, floor toms, double bass, no triggers, you know, I use mics on everything. He's only got 3 cymbals, a ride, and a china on his side. And that's it, just real, you know, stripped down, just has what he needs, plays when he needs, doesn't have too much bullshit around him, and it fits.
Paul's playing totally lends itself to that sound. I don't think that sound would have been the same if it wasn't for his approach to drumming.
It's not too fancy or intricate, but it is, I mean, like, you know it's Cannibal, you know it's Paul.
I play Cannibal Corpse style drums. That's what I do. I don't think I'd want to play in another band or even be able to play in another band. When we came down to do Tomb of the Mutilated, I know talking to Scott, and Scott was like, man, I'd really love to have Jack play all the rhythms. Nothing against Bob. It's a playing thing, and that's what a lot of bands do.
It sounded tighter at the time. To have one guitarist play it because their styles were very different.
His playing style was unorthodox, self-taught guitarist.
Playing live, it sounds cool, everything's good, but when you put it side by side, perhaps on a record, you know, it doesn't sound quite as tight.
He still got his message across. What he was playing, I could understand where he was coming from with it. His execution just wasn't the best.
Ruse would do his leads, and then if there was problems with tightness between rhythm guitar, I would just play it.
James Hetfield would play all the rhythms for Metallica because he's the stronger rhythm player, and just whoever was the stronger rhythm player out of like 2 guitar players in a band, apparently that's what they did.
That was probably a real difficult thing, you know, that we probably redid some of Bob's tracks.
It wasn't like against him, obviously, as a person or anything. It just, you know, just was going to better. We felt was going to better, you know, that album to have Jack play all the rhythms.
If you have enough time and money, you could sit with somebody and redo stuff, and you know, but unfortunately, time and money we don't have a lot of.
You're still in the band, man. You know, you're still playing live.
Things were kind of moving in a weird direction at that point, but we put together a killer record. It was an excellent session.
If you're willing to say, take criticism and say, make these better, Or when you leave, you say, you know what, I really realize now that I need to practice on this. It's about bettering yourself in your craft, right? I mean, you can only do what you want to do, and each album is a snapshot in time.
I always thought the covers were equally as powerful as the music itself.
Eaten Back to Life, and it was just like, oh yeah, this is brutal. And then Butchered at Birth sent it way over the top, but Tomb of the Mutilated, Decimated, anything you can really do taste-wise.
Wasn't that a pussy getting eaten by a corpse or something?
That's the only one that had a sex act on it. Everything else was just all about the violence, and if you bring the sex into it, it's even more shocking.
It was just like, whoa, are they going to get away with this stuff?
You can fly under the radar for a while, but eventually they're going to pinpoint you and say you can't do that anymore.
Ultimately, we had to do dual covers for some of the things to try to get it into more mainstream retail.
The first dual cover was after Butchered at Birth, because Butchered at Birth created a controversy.
What it did was it kind of just, made them have this huge reputation. It's like, ooh.
Sometimes if you don't want somebody to know about something, you should keep your mouth shut and not try to bring it up, and not sit there and scream about it.
Anything you tell people not to do or not to buy or not to listen to, people are going to try to find a way to do that.
They're going to want it that much more.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me?
Parental advisory logo is bigger than the Cannibal Corpse logo on the CD, so that has to tell you something. Look at that. That's what things should be, right? Push the envelope.
My mom didn't really like them. She confiscated it from me because she thought it was too gross and inappropriate for a kid of my age, because she saw entrails ripped from a virgin's cunt.
I tilted the tape and I saw the song Entrails Ripped from a Virgin's Cunt.
Me too.
And I was like, I'm gonna shelve this one for now. Yeah. I'm not ready for this. Me and my bowl cut, my Harry Potter glasses are not ready for this shit.
They talking about abortions and eating shit and killing this and that, and I'm just like, yo, this is some crazy shit right here.
The key is once you get past the cover, then of course the substance has to be there, and that's what Cannibal was getting better at each and every record, was that they were getting better at their instruments, better at their songwriting, and creating this awesome brutality. As the band continued to build and continued to get bigger and better in their early stages, people started to look past stuff on the covers, on the band's name, and take a look at what they were doing musically.
Tomb of the Mutilated, that's my favorite one. Just the energy level is amazing on it.
First album I ever heard by Cannibal Corpse was Tomb of the Mutilated, and right from Hammer Smashed Face, it's just, I was blown away.
I heard that and was like, what the fuck is this?
That's one of my favorites, that just moves so fast.
So this is my best Chris Barnes impression singing Hammer Smash Face.
Something's inside me. It is coming out. I don't know the rest of the lyrics.
Tomb of the Mutilated was a really big record for us.
That record, I thought, put them on a map. That really set them apart.
2/3 of the way through the Tomb of the Mutilated album cycle was probably when you start thinking, okay, now it's becoming a little more real. These guys are definitely getting into another league here.
You could see it in the crowds that were coming out. You could see it in the magazines. Something was happening. I think that's when people realized that the band just wasn't a Johnny-come-lately. They were going to stay around for a while.
The Hammer Smashed Face EP was a pretty good continuance of that. We ended up deciding to do some cover songs, and thought that it'd be cool to go back to meet up with Dennis Fura.
And we recorded the two songs for the Hammer Smashed EP here, The Exorcist and Zero the Hero. Jack was going to do the first half of the Zero the Hero solo, and Bob was going to do the second half.
The way certain recording sessions had gone over the past couple of years, we figured he might have, kind of known that he was really going to have to, step it up or things were not going to work out, and he did not manage to step it up.
And I remember you going, I think it was, you guys got a half hour or something, what do we do? Well, we had to change it and get Jack to finish the solos. So then we had a decision to make. We all thought to each other, well, we have to tell Bob that we changed his solo, because, we can't just think he did a solo and then change it. And we felt that's not right, So I remember, I think it was Barnes called him that night even maybe saying, hey, dude, we had to, change your solo.
We were also pretty young at that time, and we probably weren't very good at we didn't really know how to handle the situation. We're like, well, what do we do? Bob's having a hard time keeping up.
We were really kind of leaning more towards like Alex and Jack's writing at that point than, say, Bob's writing, you know, because he did write a lot in the beginning, you know, a lot of songs Rousey did write, you know, in the first couple of albums, you know, and even on Tomb of the Mutilated too.
I don't think a lot of our songs we wouldn't have written them if it wasn't for Bob, because he had a real offbeat way of writing and a very unique writing style.
Rousey was monumental. He's the guy that came up with the Skull Full of Maggots riffs, arguably our most popular song, you know, of all time.
I credit him with a lot of that, a lot of the greatest songs we ever wrote.
It was a different style of writing, so that was good, of course.
It took Alex and Jack to really make it concrete and decipher it.
He had some really abrasive sounding riffs like nobody I've ever heard before. It's unique because it's part of their identity, it's part of their sound.
He was, I think, recognized more for his presence on stage than anything else.
Bob was a very powerful stage presence. I mean, he's definitely a little bit bigger than the rest of us, and he was just up there like, oh.
It was kind of wild looking to me. It looked like he was just going out of control, like he was trying to jump out of his body or something.
He definitely stayed the hell out of his way on stage. He was putting everything into it. I mean, he really was a brutal performer. He was fully into doing the best he could and everything. It was not for lack of effort, so it was a very difficult decision for us to let Bob go.
We felt bad at the same time because here's the first time we're making a major change in the band, a band that we all started, all five of us, and he's an original guy, and I went to school with him in Barnes, and we've known the guy, and here we have to kick him out of the band.
We picked the worst time to tell Bob he was out of the band, and we had Alex do it.
It's not easy to talk about. You don't even want to say it to someone, you know, especially when you're friends with them.
We called him up, and the Buffalo Bills just won the championship, and they're going to the Super Bowl.
Everyone's happy in Buffalo. I mean, everyone's elated. Oh, by the way, Bob, you're out of the band.
It was not fun to have to give him the bad news.
It was rough, you know, but it was something that we felt definitely had to be done.
It really upset Bob, you know, he took it really bad.
You know, it's not easy to talk about now. It's something I'd rather not even think about, really.
I should have talked to Bob after that, but I think he was so hurt and so angry and hated us so deeply.
He pretty much gave up playing guitar and didn't want to have anything to do with the music scene or any of us or bands or anything like that.
And we have not heard from him since then.
Sorry that he dropped off the planet, so to speak, because he was a really good person, too, at heart.
You know, because it would be cool to see him, you know. I mean, we haven't seen him a long time, and he was a part of the band, obviously, and he was there since the beginning.
I kind of wish that, like, somebody knew where Rousey was just to get his little piece in on it.
I said that, too, man.
He never has made any effort to get in touch with us or anything.
It's just unfortunate that his abilities weren't progressing along with the rest of the guys. Otherwise, he probably would still be in the band.
Sucks because he was a great guy, but gotta move on. At that point, we're 3 albums in, and we gotta move on.
Bob was out, and then we're like, okay, well, who are we gonna get?
And we were going on the road in like 3 weeks or something, and I was like, okay, this ain't the greatest time to kick out your guitar player, but, you know, we had no choice, and we're scrambling to get a replacement at this point.
My name was mentioned, and then Alex called me while I was living in Miami.
You know, we were still in Buffalo here, and Rob was already living down in Miami.
Rob wasn't in a band, he just kind of came down. He was a great rhythm guitar player, looking for a band.
I saw Malevolent Creation played with Primeval and Cannibal and Cynic up at a show in Buffalo. And I seen them guys playing, and I was like, damn, I gotta move to Florida.
We introduced Rob to people that became his band Solstice, that started his first project.
I started it with the drummer, Alex Marquez, down in Miami, and the guitar player, Dennis Munoz.
And they did an album at More Sound with Rob singing and playing guitar.
Yeah, he's fucking got a great voice. He's got an awesome voice.
I pretty much started singing out of the fact that we just really couldn't find a singer with a voice that we were kind of shooting for.
It's incredible. It's a great record. It stands up today, right now. Put it on.
Right after the Solstice thing, him and Alex Marquez did Malevolent.
Yeah, me and the drummer, Alex, we pretty much joined Malevolent while we still had Solstice going. We just put Solstice on hold.
Well, Malevolent Creation was another band from Buffalo, New York, that had moved down to South Florida and kind of put their footing in there.
Rob was always a good friend of ours, and he was into the same music we were into. It seemed like a good fit.
We recorded Retribution.
We had problems with Malevolent, like normal, and then You got offered something good for Cannibal.
I got in touch with him and I said, well, look, you're still in this band Solstice, but do you have time to come up and do some touring with us?
I said, of course, and then I flew up to Buffalo and I learned their set like in 2 weeks or something.
He learned like a song a day.
Really amused by all the Cannibal stuff, just the absurdity of the riffs and the lyrics. The first couple of rehearsals, as he's learning the stuff, he's just laughing.
The riffs were different to me, you know, I had to like adjust to their style.
Eventually he grabbed hold and went death metal.
I actually wasn't asked to join the band. I pretty much was just asked to fulfill the tour commitments that they had at the time.
We didn't really know what we were going to do in the long term. It was kind of like, all right, we need a filler for now. You know, we'll work on, you know, are we going to keep them or are we going to find a guitar player, obviously, after the touring's all done. After we did that tour with Rob, it just seemed like a natural thing because we knew him already. He was from Buffalo, you know, we're friends in a sense, and he was a great guitar player.
Great guy, known him forever. Just made sense to get him in.
They pretty much said, hey, you're more than welcome to stay with us if you want. Pretty much saying I could join the band.
It was early 1993 when Rob joined up with us. We'd been friends with Rob as long as we'd been friends with any of the people on the Buffalo scene. We went way back with him.
The year before, I was in Malevolent Creation, and we did a tour with Obituary, Agnostic Front, and Cannibal Corpse.
This was the first time we actually had a tour bus, and we were on the bus with Malevolent, and Rob was in the band at the time, and we were all just partying every night. I mean, it was a traveling sideshow of circus freaks.
We got along great. We had fun together.
I came down to the bus to see where Bob was, and he was down there stumbling around in the hallway. And Barrett was already in the back of the bus, kind of. Me and Bob were like in the front kind of the bus. And Bob ran down the hall and basically just clocked Barrett right in the head and knocked him down.
That was out of nowhere. That's kind of an obscure moment in time there.
I can't even really actually remember what happened.
Nothing happened. He just came at you for no reason.
Oh, he just knocked me down?
He just fucking decked you. He came running from the front of the bus and just decked you. Right?
He was really drunk.
Yeah, oh yeah,
And
he was
just,
wasted,
yeah, he
dude.
wanted to let out his frustration on somebody, and it was me.
I know we all kind of like later on thought Bob must have had a premonition that night that Barrett was going to replace him, and he just got his shot in. And Rob came into the picture, you know, in a big way.
And Rob joined up, and then all of a sudden we're going to Russia and doing a movie, and he was probably like, wow.
I got a phone call from Mike Faley one day, and he was like, hey, Chris, I got an offer for you guys to do a movie. Have you ever heard of this comedian, Jim Carrey?
We knew of Jim. We thought he was a really funny guy in Living Color and everything. We were all aware of his comedy.
Friday night, probably about 5 o'clock at night, get a call. Hey, Mike, do you think that Cannibal Corpse can make it down here Sunday?
We told Alex, and Alex didn't think it was a good idea at first.
I just want to make sure that we're not going to look stupid in this movie.
When I got the script and kind of read through the script, I'm like, oh boy. I don't know, this looks really corny and cheesy.
We're like, whatever's going around us, we don't care. Like, if Jim Carrey's running around doing crazy stuff or whatever they're doing, that's fine. But we want to, if we're going to be Cannibal Corpse in the movie, we want to behave the way we always do.
They didn't think the band would agree to it, but we said, sure, why not? Let's go in there and do this thing.
I remember first hearing that they were going to be in the movie and thinking, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard of.
I guess, you know, Jim Carrey really wanted us in that.
Jim Carrey, back in the day, huge death metal fan.
Getting his makeup done for the movie, and he was cranking out Pantera and listening to AC/DC.
He liked us. I think he liked DSI, Napalm Death.
He came out of his trailer and he was wearing the clothes that he had on in the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just couldn't stop laughing. I was like, oh my God, here he is.
Dude, that's funny.
And he seemed more excited about meeting us. Like, it was so crazy. It was like, oh my God, it's Cannibal Corpse.
He knew all the material that we did. He knew the albums. He was asking us to play songs in soundcheck that we didn't even remember anymore.
He said, so what song are you going to do? Hammer Smash Face or Rancid Amputation?
Dude,
he already
that was
which
weird.
I could only imagine Rob at that time with Jim Carrey.
It's like two magnets being, you know, floors.
Reverse.
Yeah, reverse. Yeah.
Two of the same kinds of like crazy, frenetic, comedic, like
freaks.
I did mention that I could contort my arm, you know how he did all those crazy body movements, and I was like, yeah, well, I could twist my arm around, and I did that, and he was like, quite impressive.
I remember Chris, I think, asked him to do Fire Marshal Bill, and he did.
Kind of just was like nails on a chalkboard. I would see that vein pop out of the neck, and he's like, that makes you, that gets you sick, he's like, what, this? And I was like, no, dude.
They filmed for 4 days, and it's all you see in the movie is like a minute and a half of those guys.
We had to fake playing to nothing. The crowd couldn't make a sound. They had to look like they were making noise.
There were people there that were moshers, like full-on, like hardcore and death metal people.
Just fucking hearing Cannibal Corpse coming over the PA loud. They were just doing what they usually did, get crazy.
There were guys from Malevolent Creation in the audience. And the one guy who does a stage dive is from a band called Brutal Mastication. You see him jumping, a guy named Jimmy.
The director's trying to explain it. No, you can't make any noise. You have to make believe.
Well, they cut the playback, so all you hear is all these feet. The mosh pit, silent mosh pit.
It was definitely a little intimidating, but it was cool to watch it all come together and see that.
And of course, it was phenomenal. I mean, Jim Carrey made that movie. I couldn't believe. It's like, wait, that script is what I just saw on the street?
I actually went to the theaters to see that, and they go to the concert scene and the Hammer Smash Face started. I was like, this is awesome. This is the coolest movie ever.
He backs out that door and you hear, and I said, I freaked out. I was like, I wasn't even in the band. I'm like, that's fucking Cannibal Corpse.
Like 20 death metal heads in this movie theater start banging their heads and moshing.
I screamed in the movie, like, yeah!
And all these parents and like kids are looking around going, what's going on? They were freaking out.
And Rob's wearing a Cynic shirt and that.
I was like, yeah, I'm gonna wear a Cynic shirt just to show some support for a friend's band.
He wore that Cynic shirt in that scene. When you see him grinding out, it's like, yeah.
I saw the guitar first. I recognized it because his head was down and the hair hanging. I go, that's Rob. That's my son.
You got people that are having to see the movie, had to be subject to Cannibal Corpse, whether they liked it or not.
A lot of kids who've never been exposed to this music were exposed to it, and they were like, wow, that's pretty sick.
I actually told my father that we were going on tour with the band that was in Ace Ventura, because he loves that movie, and it's the only reference point I could give him. And then he was very confused by it.
I still use that as the claim to fame, pretty much. Well, you may have heard us. We were in a movie, Ace Ventura. Oh, you were in that movie?
I'd say about 3 weeks